Well, hello there. Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. As promised, we want to have that big conversation. There has been a lot going on over the past few weeks. It's just 5 days to the general election, and I want us to talk about the role of the church in politics. This is Pulpit and Politics, and in studio with me to discuss that is Dr. Anthony Macmillan Kiiru, I beg your pardon. Karibu sana to the studio, sir.
Thank you.
And then, of course, joining me virtually is Archbishop Anthony Muheria. Karibu sana, sir.
Asante sana.
Well, let's kick off this discussion. We are in the middle of high-octane politics, and Kenyans can clearly see it, Daktari. The temperatures are rising by the day. The contest is being made by some to look like a do-or-die affair. What can be done to ensure that politics in Kenya are viewed as just any other competition with an expected winner and an expected loser?
I agree with you that the environment is not only highly heightened, but also toxic. And elections are about providing an environment where the citizens are able to choose and exercise their democratic right without any undue force or manipulation. And what's happening in our country certainly is not good for our citizens. And I'm here to urge the politicians to know that after the 9th of August, life continues in this country. Our people will go back to their daily routine, and we don't have to get them so charged like the 9th is the end of Kenya, is the end of the world.
Yes.
And politicians do that, and sometimes one wonders whether the way they are approaching politics is for the good of this country or for their own selfish gains. And I think that's why we need to urge them to exercise caution in the manner in which they conduct politics in this country.
Well, and I want to engage you, Archbishop Anthony Muheria, virtually. I'll ask you the same question. What is it that we can do? Because now it seems like the country is fully in a political mode, and we've seen this, we've had this experience before. Immediately after the next president is sworn in, we start in earnest campaigning. What can be done to ensure that now this is just viewed as any other competition, a competition of ideas and not a do-or-die affair?
Thank you very much. I think it's also good to recognize that so far, according to my assessment, there has been a better behavior of Kenyans than we have had in other moments. So it means there is something positive. It's true volatile, and certainly we do not condone we do not endorse and condone these utterances and very aggressive political engagements. However, I think there are two things to me going forward that we have to think. The politicians seems to know or feel that they have spent so much money, invested so much, that it's what makes them feel is do or die. And that's one area that will cool down when the financials of campaigns are regulated. I also think that going forward, and I think we've matured quite a bit, that the Kenyan has to learn that the campaign itself is not a moment of gain, which is the big story of corruption, that when there is a bit of better well-being, when the level of living costs are fairly contained, to be easier for the Kenyan not to be manipulated. But I think finally, at least in this first answer, we Kenyans must realize that we have this country in our hands and make a covenant that we will not allow politicians to grab or capture peace from us, that we've made a huge step forward in this election, this particular round. But I think it has to reach a stage where rather than looking up and depending on the political players, we are the ones who dictate the rules of the game, where we make a covenant. And right now we can make that covenant as we appeal to the politicians not to engage in these bad exchanges. We ask the Kenyans, make a covenant and say, we are going to keep peace, we'll vote peacefully, and we will not allow them to incite or drive us into that path of hatred. I think that's the maturity that Kenyans are getting to, and I trust we will reach there.
Well, thank you.
May I add on that, please?
Okay, go ahead.
I agree with Archbishop that this issue of money has really brought us to where we are. And the sooner we realize that elections are not about money, I think it will be very, very helpful. But secondly, there is need for a lot of civic education. Yeah. And it's unfortunate that we've not had enough civic education that helps our people to begin to understand what this whole election is about, and that is their future that they are dealing with, and they need to deal with their future in a sober manner. I'm part of election preparedness in Kiambu, and we've involved a lot of stakeholders in that process, the youth, maendeleo ya wanawake, the church, and all those groups. And I think the more we have shared and discussed all of this, we have an obligation to make sure that those that we lead, if it's in the church, that as pastors we are using those forums to be able to help our people to understand the purpose of the election. And as it's not a do or die affair that we are involved in.
Dr. Kiiru, it's good that Archbishop Muheria has brought this issue up. It seems like the politicians feel entitled to do whatever it is that they want because they've spent a lot in campaigning. But then again, I remember there was the elections campaign financing act that would have compelled politicians to anyone that is aspiring to participate in an election disclose where they're getting their money to finance such elections. But then again, MPs came again with another law to counter that. It was such a wise idea, but then MPs came up with a law. I think it was a bill sponsored by Kieni MP, Ndaragwa MP, that is Jeremiah Kioni. A law to counter that. Do you think there's political goodwill actually to ensure that politics is not made to be about money, which eventually leads people to feel entitled to cause all this kind of mayhem in the country?
I think the unfortunate thing is that we are asking the same MPs who want to use money to buy positions and status, and they are the ones we are asking them to legislate. And I think this is why we didn't go very far. And in my view, I think we need to begin to bring pressure, especially from the civil society, from non-state actors, so that this law is again brought back, because we cannot continue like this forever. There has to be an end where we see politics and going into political positions because you have given money. We must bring this to an end, whatever it is that's going to take.
So no political goodwill from our leaders?
That's what there is. They are the beneficiaries, so to speak. So why should they have themselves regulated financially?
Well, Archbishop, let's take it back to the church. At some point, the church seemed to be split on who to succeed President Uhuru Kenyatta. And I'm talking about this during this election cycle. But then again, I think there was some voice of reason. And the clergy said, we can't be seen as being partial. What really happened? Because I think the deputy president, the number 2 in command in the country, had come up with a proposal saying that, you guys should choose either the good side or the wrong side, educate your followers on who should really take the mantle after President Uhuru Kenyatta. What informed that decision that now the church remains partial? Because at some point it was really split.
To be honest, I do not think that at any stage we as church, and I want to speak about the mainstream church, we never had any preference or leaning towards any of the political groupings or parties. What may have seemed at the beginning was we put a lot of effort in trying to reconcile our president with his deputy because of the good of this nation, because that was more about making the country more manageable. But at no one stage did we have any preference, for the simple reason that as religious leaders, we must realize in our pews or in our mosques or in our temples, we have people of various leanings, political leanings and persuasions. And so we must be inclusive. Our places of worship are welcome to all. We do not have any discrimination. So we cannot take a position. We ought not to take a position. And even now we are urging any religious leader not to take a position, so that should there be any disagreements, we stand in the gap and we're able to arbitrate. So at no one stage did the churches, I would say, take a position. However, there were certain churches which are more the smaller groups, perhaps moved more by the financial gains, who have made declarations. But I would want to distinguish that within what we call the church, there are those who really are pursuing the gospel values and service, and those who are pursuing more the financial gains. So I think that sometimes we are wrapped up together with a few wrongdoers. So in
we seem to have lost that connection there to Archbishop Anthony Muheria. But coming back to the same question that I was engaging Archbishop Anthony Muheria on, he's brought up a very important aspect to it. The church was tasked with bringing together the deputy president and his boss, Uhuru Kenyatta, President Uhuru Kenyatta. But as he says, before we lost him on that connection, he says that the efforts proved futile. Do you think it should end at that, in your opinion, Dr. Macmillan Kiiru? Do you think it should end at that, or the efforts should be revived after this election, after the 9th of August? Whoever wins, the church now comes back to the drawing table and says, look, here's the winner, here's the loser. The flare-ups, we don't want any more flare-ups in the country. Should that be done by the church? Should it take that leading role to ensure that we don't get to where we are as a country?
I'm glad that the church made efforts to try and reconcile the top leadership. It's unfortunate that these efforts were futile. And I think there is need for distinction between personalities and their preferences, but these positions that they hold on behalf of the Kenyan society. And it's for that reason we as a church were concerned about reconciliation, because this toxic environment that has been created is as a result of failure to reconcile. I don't think it's possible at this point. I think we've gone, it's too late in the day to try to reconcile this. And I think the 9th will decide the way forward for Kenyans. And again, it's unfortunate, and I think our leadership need to realize that once they take the position of leadership, they take these positions on behalf of the citizens. And it's no longer that this is what I want or this is what I do not want. They have to seriously consider the implications for the people that they lead. And I hope that we have learned a lesson, and especially as we move forward with the running mates and the presidential candidates, that they must learn a lesson from what has happened, so that Kenyans will never be taken to the position or situation that we have been in, because it's very, very unfortunate, and is what is really causing a lot of concern for us as a church. The church is there to reconcile, to mediate, to bring sanity. And I'm glad that we tried what we could as a church, but unfortunately those efforts were futile.
And I understand we have Archbishop back on online. Archbishop, just before we lost you on that connection, there's something important that you're saying.
Yes.
It's okay. It's understandable. There's something you were talking about. There's a point that you were raising, a very important point. But then again, I did a follow-up question with Dr. Macmillan right here in studio about the efforts that you put to ensure that the top leadership reconciles. And I've just asked him, I was engaging him, asking him, is that a lost cause? Do you plan to go back there after this coming election?
I don't think that is now valid because we were at that stage trying for the good of the country that the executive be united with at the service it was given. So once they are no longer in the executive, we can do what is just the Christian work of making sure they forgive, but it's not a national service as we were doing then. So in the context of politics, what would be concerned is that the new elected leaders be encouraged to work together, be mentored, and in this way we hope that we can build a country that is not dependent on friendship, but institutionally. So the office of the president and the office of the deputy president work at the service of the people, whether they are like-minded or whether at one moment it might happen that they might differ in some things, that they find a working mechanism. So I think this is a lesson of democracy.
Okay.
And we work in mentoring them.
You wanted to add something on
I
that?
think there's something I'd like to add here.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
The role that the church has played needed to be properly structured and even institutionalized, and maybe even add some value to it.
Yeah.
Because leaving this country to simply the executive, that it is in his power to do what he wants to do, not just with his deputy, but also with others. I think the organs that we have within the government, with the church leadership also being consulted, should be able to provide some kind of mediation so that what we have suffered over the last 5 years shouldn't be anything that we'll be looking forward into the future.
And I want to take you back to Archbishop Anthony Muheria. Archbishop, the clergy has said in the past severally that Kenyans should purpose to vote for persons who have high moral standards and have a clear visionary plan of action or manifesto. The clergy is also known to be close to many leaders, some even with questionable character. Why not guide those leaders and give them that voice of reason, and then in turn Kenyans will make their right choice?
That's a very interesting and I think useful question to ask, because we look at the ideal first. And you say the ideal leader needs to be a leader who is humble, with great integrity, who knows how to work with people, a man who cares for those who are undertrodden or with difficulty. All those values that we highlight, honest, truthful, trustworthy. However, it happens that sometimes the leaders that we now have to choose at the ward level, at the constituency level, or even at the national level, may not meet our desired ideal candidate in terms of integrity, knowledge, or other things. So that's where democracy comes in, and we urge the voter to go out for that leader who best scores, if you may say that, on those scores of integrity, of trustworthiness, of truthfulness. And by democracy, looking at the candidate from different sides, you are able to say, well, generally the people think this is a better person. Generally people say that this is a worse person. Maybe sometimes the call we make, rather than saying this is the best person, even though this guy was a good person. So we are urging that you must vote to avoid worse leaders. And I think going forward, we must work about nurturing proper leadership, so that from the lowest level we can have more leaders of integrity. We pray that this round we'll have more persons elected of greater integrity than the last election. And that must keep improving, but we must nurture them.
I want to bring it back to studio. Dr. Macmillan, you are a senior lecturer, and I'm sure you have a way of gauging if whatever it is that you're teaching is being grasped by your students. Would you agree that people are increasingly no longer listening to the voice of reason, to the voice of the church, when it comes to matters morality?
If I might connect with what Archbishop has shared, I teach a transformational leadership. And value is so critical. And I think it's upon us as a church and a society to make sure that we are nurturing those values and those qualities. And I'm glad that chapter 6 really emphasizes on that. But we need to go beyond just talking about these values and talking about morality and begin to have it practiced. And as a church, we really have a challenge to be the model of that kind of leadership that we want to see in society. There are certain instances where perhaps we may not have done that. I'm very, very concerned that the judiciary, or rather the organs within the government, don't help us in moving forward. Because as you remember, there were candidates that had questionable character, and they were put forward, but between IBC and the judiciary,
the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission,
they were let to go. And in a sense, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. If we all agree that we want quality, we want integrity, we want these values in our leadership, we must also make sure that we are enforcing that somewhat, but not just being like we don't have a position, we don't care. And that seems to be what's happening. I agree that perhaps the next parliament or elected leaders may have better quality than perhaps we have had, but I wish the IBC would be able to ensure that those who are cleared have passed the test of integrity and morality, which we don't have at the moment.
And I want to correct here and say that when I'm talking about the clergy, I'm talking about the whole spectrum, all the religious leaders. I'm not talking about the church only. And so I'll just shoot the same to you, Archbishop Muheria. From where you sit, do you feel that people are no longer listening to that voice? You've just talked about advising Kenyans to vote for leaders with good characters, those that have a clear visionary plan for the country, good manifestos. But then again, here we are. After 5 years, probably we'll be having the same discussion. Do you think we are not, our leaders, or rather Kenyans are not listening to that voice of reason? And I won't talk about the church, I'll just talk about the religious leaders. Are Kenyans really following what the religious leaders are telling them?
For this, I think I'm a bit more optimistic, sorry. Much more optimistic.
Okay.
And the issue here is to say that, we are trying to bring the people to listen, but at the same time there's a huge bombardment of a lot of other anti-values and vices that comes through entertainment. And even in this particular election cycle, we've seen that rather than waving values and development in front of electorate, we are waving how we are going to loosen our morals. And it seems even there are people who are somehow celebrating that, which is unfortunate because it means that we are losing the very ground of a civilized society. But I think, to be honest, there has been a lot of listening to the voice of reason amongst our Kenyans. The people are responding in many ways. Just look at the peace that have reigned in this election cycle. Look at how few the skirmishes that have been there. It's true there has been heat, but it's nothing to compare with heat we have experienced before. But at the same time, the things we witness are the distillation of the societal status. The society now is pretty rotten in many aspects. There is a lot of ills that have come in, and especially greed and self-love and the lack of the spirit of service from the leaders to the least. And that's what has given corruption the fertile ground to grow. And so what we distill to leadership, what we distill in the interactions we have on the road, in the services of the government, in the schools, you realize the same story, is because the raw material, as it were, the society is ill. So it's a challenge to us to work as religious leaders to improve the situation and the value system. But it's also education. Our education too is being run with knee-jerk. There is no systematic, value-driven instilling values in our children that has been thought through. So in a sense, we have to step back and start again building those blocks. But to be honest, as I say, I'm very optimistic. We have made great progress. We have moved a step forward. And in this particular cycle, I wouldn't have wished to have been listened more. And yesterday there were the religious leaders who were very positive, and we've been given a lot of space to actually reach our people through you, the media, and other means. So in a sense, I feel I'll give a good future for the people listening to this voice of reason. We've raised up in the level of trust of the people.
And I want to remain with you, Archbishop. You've said before, and not just this time, that the church will always remain impartial and nonpartisan when it comes to politics. But then again, you're saying there are some values that are being taught to young people through entertainment and all these things. So up to what point should the church remain impartial? Are you saying when it comes to politics, the church will remain impartial and will keep quiet when all these flare-ups are going on? And then when it comes to social issues like entertainment, that's when the church will only speak?
I think one thing is to say you are impartial, to say we don't support a candidate, but I can still flag out something that candidate is pushing that is immoral. I may not support a certain political leaning or persuasion, but I will also flag that they are not taking care of a major aspect. And so I will critique them. By critiquing them doesn't mean I'm going against that particular persuasion. My role is to be the conscience, and therefore to flag things which are immoral or that will bring terrible. Again, we've gone off the phone. I'm sorry.
Well, we seem to have a connection problem there with Archbishop Anthony Muheria. Quite some important points that he is raising. Dr. Macmillan, you're a management leadership consultant. You're a senior lecturer. Do you feel like your job is being taken for granted, especially when it comes to leadership? Do you think like professionals like you're moving the country 5 steps ahead, and then there are these other leaders, the political leaders, who move it 10 steps backward? And so your job ends up being, your efforts also end up being futile.
I think there is hope. We have quality leadership among professionals and quality leadership among religious leadership. But unfortunately, that type of leadership does not offer themselves for political leadership. And I think this is an area we need as a church and as professionals to encourage this quality leadership to take up the role of leadership in this country. As it said, when the good people don't vote, they are actually voting for the wrong people to be in positions. And I think as we move into the future, this is something that we have to do. And I think there is progress as we compare this election with others that have gone. We can see certainly some hope. But even the media has a responsibility. Of course, is a bad news and make the news. We need to begin to focus on quality, integrity, and those values, and market them loud and clear. And with the civic education, we get our people to begin to focus and to be able to make their choices between those who have those values and those who don't have those values. Right at the moment, the transaction is around finances, which is very unfortunate, and we need to move that into choice on quality and values and morality as we think about leadership.
Just before we lost that connection with Archbishop Anthony Muheria, he was talking about something very important. He says that he flags off leaders, and I'm going to ask this to him. I'm going to shoot this question to him. He's saying that he flags off leaders every time he feels that they are going towards the wrong path. But then again, we look at our country, the history of our country. There were days that the clergy was known to really fight for social justice. If you like, you'd call it activism. The days of Ndingi Mwananzeki, the late Reverend Timothy Njoya and the likes. What really happened? Where do you think the rain started beating us?
I think we need to realize that the context in which they operated and made a voice is certainly different from the context that we have. That is not to say that the church and the religious leaders shouldn't be able to call out or even castigate those who are not really living right as far as our society is concerned. It's just that we have a different focus today than we may have had before. And as you know, we have had lots of forums with the church leaders where we are able to raise issues. The NCCK, the KCCB, the EAK are bodies that have represented much more the voice of the church than perhaps looking at individuals. So I wouldn't necessarily saying that there's something that has gone wrong. It's just that we need to make sure that the leadership that is leading these churches and organizations is also living true to their calling. So that's the way I would look at what has happened.
So you wouldn't look at it as probably the religious leaders dining and wining with the politicians, and that's the reason why they went silent?
I think there is an aspect, it may not necessarily be widespread, and that is church leaders having an appetite for finances for themselves and for this project and the other. But I wouldn't say that that really is everywhere. It's not all the church leaders. There are some that may be doing that. Of course, we must realize that as a society, we are more materialistic today than we may have been 20, 30 years ago. And that materialism, as Archbishop had said earlier on, is leading the society into a road that's not right. But I see leadership that is really, I stand on the pulpit severally in churches on Sundays, and I will simply call it what it is. And I have not been very friendly to the political leadership because I feel that these values and qualities and integrity and transparency is not being as emphasized as it ought to be.
And I understand we've reconnected with Archbishop Anthony Muheria. Archbishop, if you can hear me, there's something that you were saying. Kindly carry on.
Yes. Sorry about that. It looks like we are not being very lucky tonight, but I think we'll keep going. But thank you for having me back. The issue I was trying to say is that we have worked, and I think our Kenyans are much more open to the counsel and advice we are given. And therefore, we shouldn't as well bash ourselves too hard. But it's a process of working, and civic education, and especially the understanding that the culture is not that well. We have to turn it. The solutions that we've been proposing are very simplistic, and we really need to heal the entire society. When we speak about corruption, it's not about sending people to jail. It's about making people understand the wrongs, the ills, and then the need to act to the ills that you witness, responsibility, citizenry, and all that. So I think it's a task we have first as church, but a task we have as society, and we have taken it on, and we hope that it is going to render fruits.
Mm-hmm. And I've promised to ask you this, Archbishop Muheria. There's a time that the church was known to fight for social justice, and mostly against the one-party rule that was quite strong at that time. But then again, now we have a different problem. Our problems have evolved from one-party leadership and what some would call a repressive regime, to now having a crop of leaders who seemingly don't really care. Why is the church not really taking that center stage again and really taking to the streets, fighting for social justice, as it were, back in the 90s?
Yes, the scenario has changed, the social fabric has changed, the parameters have changed. When there's a fight against a one-party state, and that second liberation is often referred to, it was something that the whole society woke up to, and the church was maybe the most safest place to express opposition or critique government, and therefore it was very popular. As we went into multipartyism, again, we were the ones who were mapping the road so that we don't go into excesses, etc. So we were quite outspoken, without doubt, and we were carrying over the mode of operation of the time of the fight against the one-party state, which was public manifestation of street action. And that mass action seemed to have gotten to the people as being the only way to solve, but it is not the only way to solve the problems we face. Then we came into the Constitution, and I think that is where again things went difficult, because they went sour with the media. We were on the same side with all the media at that time. Until that time, and then when the church took a different side from the media, we became our interests were divided, and so the church became the enemy, and we were bashed quite a bit. And I can tell you, because I've written even a paper on this, explaining how the media blacked out the church in order to show that the church is not relevant. And that's something we can actually look and see that. Look at just before 2-3 years ago, before COVID, how much was reported about what the bishops or the church or the religious leaders say, as opposed to how in the funerals, the people who seem to be speaking and giving the lead sermon were the politician. What we reported was a politician's word, not the words of the bishop or priest. So there was a total distortion to somehow idolize the politician. And that's partly the problem that I would say the culprit is the media in that. Having said that, I think we have been working in a different way. We've been working behind the scenes. Okay. We've been trying to more diplomacy, speaking, trying to critique, not necessarily in front of cameras, trying to correct, so we have still been very, very relevant and have actually steered this country from disaster on many moments, but we have not come out into the public cameras to explain what we did. But one last thing that maybe I can want to signal: corruption. We have been carrying out a lot of campaigns against corruption. The Catholic bishops 2019 went out and made a huge public gesture, and we raised a huge campaign. The bishops removed their shoes. The bishop made an act of penance. The bishop started pushing the country into a consciousness of this is wrong. It's not about taking someone and jailing him. Is that we are doing wrong. We have to re-evaluate how we act. And that is what we are speaking about, a moral appraisal and a moral re-energization and a moral compass. And that's what we have been doing until, of course, COVID hit. So we have been indeed at the center of the social ills and in critiquing. And just the fact that we tried to reconcile the president and the deputy for over 3 years, it wasn't anywhere in the news, but we were trying our bit. And when there were things that went wrong, we tried also to do those things. Because our interest as a nation is not popularity as a religious leader, we don't advertise what we do. And I can assure you at times that is much more effective. So we are still going to be there as a conscience of the country and trying to hold this country and especially empower the Kenyans to move out from the slavery of vice and the slavery of that we are helpless to the freedom of that we are capable of living up values and standing for them. And although it's in the Constitution, it's not that because the Constitution grants it, but because in our humanity and self-esteem, we believe we ought and we know we can, and with God's help we'll reach. That's where we go as church and religious leaders. If we take that line, then we can cleanse this country and bring out the blossoming of a country that is healthy, united, harmonious, and a real nation.
Well, as we wrap this up, Bishop Muheria, I want to just stay there with you. You have represented the public in the Judicial Service Commission, and you resigned. That was over 10 years ago for reasons that you articulated quite well during that time. So definitely you know the inner workings of the judiciary. We are headed to a hotly contested presidential election. The election whose results might be contested at the Supreme Court. There have been some leaders saying that the judiciary is unfair to them. And that is not a good picture. Do you think that political hate that is being directed to those judges, will they remain sober to handle such a delicate task if they'll be called to duty to do that?
This is a very difficult moment, just as before election, and when desperation creeps in the last month, we have all kind of accusation, counter-accusations, conspiracy theories. All these people will peddle it to us, and especially these politicians, so as to unsettle us, so as to create anxiety, and so as to create a lot of suspicion and doubt to the IEBC and to the other constitutional organs that are charged with this process. And that is part of this playing in the hands of the politicians. They want us to believe, and they will do a lot of fake news, a lot of fake presentation and lies. And it is the Kenyan whom we urge, please don't listen to all these peddlers. Make your vote and vote without this emotion charge, but vote with sobriety. And it is in this context that I also want to say I and many have had the preparedness of IEBC. And to my assessment, we've never been so prepared. The level of preparedness is very high, and the security levels and the logistics, they can improve even in explaining to us, but they are high there. And I really want to encourage them and to laud them for what they've done. And the Kenyans should be fairly confident that they are prepared. And then to come to your question, the judiciary. I do believe that we have a great judiciary. It is a judiciary that has had many issues in terms of still clearing out situations of corruption, etc. But I do believe in the last 1 year we've seen a lot of goodwill and desire to do things right and to be fully independent, to stand with truth. It's enough just to see what happened with the BBI rulings. that you saw that there was no external pressure coming in. So they really portray to us that independence. So into my mind, there is no reason to the contrary to say that there is influence, undue influence from any side or any quarter that could influence our judiciary, especially our Supreme Court. So I would give them the benefit of the doubt, and I would want to encourage the Kenyans not to let ourselves be sold this fear and to be bought into suspicion. There has been no proven reason to doubt the capacity of our judiciary, and especially our Supreme Court. We pray that they maintain and keep and prove us right in this one. So my attitude is more, I said already, I'm an optimist, but above all, I don't want to be one who plants suspicion. I want to plant confidence. Unless proven otherwise, I'm confident when I see the facts on the table. Okay. And the judiciary as it exists now, especially the Supreme Court and the High Court, the Appeal Court and the Supreme Court, have shown tremendous independence and the application of great jurisprudence. Therefore, my score would be yes, they are prepared for any appeals, both at the presidential or county or other levels.
Okay. Well, thank you. Dr. Macmillan,
yeah.
The Archbishop has really addressed Kenyans. As you wrap this up, what message do you have especially to leaders in the country?
My prayer is that on the 9th, it will be very, very clear who the winner is. And therefore urging Kenyans to do all they can to go and exercise their democratic right, go and vote, pay whatever price has to be paid, so that there will be a clear winner on the 9th of August. But in case we shall have to go to the Supreme Court, I agree with the Archbishop. We need to exercise confidence and allow the process to take its place. We must not allow ourselves to be incited by the politicians, but to remain calm and be at peace and allow the judicial system to carry this process right to the end, which will be for the good of this nation. And again, I want to reiterate the need for peace, that before, during, and after, we need peace. So that this is an environment of peace, and Kenyans must exercise their democratic right without any manipulations, without bribery, without all the undue influences that come around this time. But I would also like to say I'm very, very hopeful and very optimistic that we will all surprise ourselves by the way this election will be, because Kenyans have matured and we've seen for ourselves how we have no other country that we can run to. This is our only country. And life will be as normal after the 9th as it is before the 9th. That would be my appeal to the Kenyans.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Macmillan Kiiru, Management Leadership Consultant. Thank you so much for gracing our show. And of course, thank you so much, Archbishop Anthony Muheria, the Archbishop of Nyeri Diocese. Thank you so much for joining us virtually. Asante sana.
Thank you so much.
Well, that has been the voice of reason right here on News Tonight on TV47. On behalf of everyone who has made this a success, thank you so much for watching. My name is Eric Munene.